All right. Well, welcome everyone to one of our AFC webinar series that we've been doing since I think March, I want to say. So this is part two. Our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Commission has put on the first part, Social Justice Matters. This was the first part was a panel discussion on campus safety and law enforcement on our campus, our college campuses, and this is part two. There was lots of great discussion, a great webinar, and everybody wanted more. So this is part two. So I will throw it over to Miss Wajika Jackson, our Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Commission Chair-elect, in just a minute. I would like to pitch our annual conference, our 71st annual conference coming up November 16th through the 20th. It is a virtual online conference. We have lots of good rates. There's no travel. Everybody always says it's hard for me to pay for travel. There's no travel now. So just like to pitch that out there, and we'd love to have you attend. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Jackson to get us started as our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everybody being here with us today. Again, my name is Wajika Jackson. I'm actually the director also of Northwest Florida State College of Business and Computer Technology Department and the Region 1 director for AFC. And I am so happy that you all are here with us today. And I would like to bring greetings from the Panhandle Central Time Zone. So go Central Time. But welcome to part two of the Equity Commission's discussion on social justice matters. After we left, I know we probably left the first part with a lot of unanswered questions. And I think the conversation was just so rich that I said, we need to start on a part two quick, because there's so many ways that we could take this conversation in a positive way to continue to enlighten and empower our community in higher education. And also, if you're not aware, October is actually Global Diversity Awareness Month. So what other months do it but October? So I was really excited that we could really get it in, this conference in Hurricane Zeta is not going to affect us, and we're going to get this thing started. So again, welcome. And I would like to welcome our panelists today. So we have Mr. Alex Jordan. He is the Florida Department of Education Deputy Director of Facility Planning and Budgeting. Next, we have Captain Ryan Woods. He is the Santa Fe College Police. He is the captain of the Santa Fe College Police Department. We have Dr. Jeff McGill. He is the Public Safety Training Center Director at Northwest Florida State College. We also have Dr. Gregory A. Salters. He is the Assistant Chief and Executive Officer with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. And finally, hopefully he has joined us. We're going to have a Northwest Florida State College Campus Police Chief, Mr. Aaron Murray. Now, instead of reading out the bios, because I want to be a good steward of everybody's time, I am going to put the bios in the chat, or I may have it sent out at the end so we all have a reference for everybody's information. Okay? So let's go ahead. So, and I'm going to throw this question out there. So whoever would like to take it would be great. How should training institutions, higher education institutions, modify their curriculum based on the current social climate?
I'll take it first. Good morning, everyone. And how we address that is that understanding the issues. One of the things that I talked about originally in the last meeting was policy, protest to policy. You know, what are we protesting about? What are some of the things that we could address to ensure what we're protesting about is being addressed across the board, from higher ed, from our communities, and as well, definitely understanding the dynamics of our community's issues and concerns. So what we need to do is identify what are some of the concerns that our community is having, but also understanding how our role on our campus and our institution play a factor in back into our community. And that's what we're having to disconnect, that we're in higher ed, but we're not really truly vetting what is going on in our neighborhoods that also can play a strong role in our local community colleges or state colleges. So I think that that's what we need to start at, is understanding some of the challenges in our community so that we can address those.
Thank you.
All righty. I agree with you, Brother Jordan. One of the things I'd also like to do is I think that we should take it a little bit further when we're talking about our education, because as Mr. Jordan would say, we need to look at what's happening. We also need to look at the demographics of our universities and see how is our demographic being affected by what's going on. And I think we also need to broaden the spectrum, because I've seen a lot of times that it stays in the criminal justice curriculums or conversations, whereas we don't really discuss it in our other fields of endeavor, and how there's multiple lenses of what's happening with this process. For instance, when I sat down with the League of Cities years back and we were discussing the impact of some of the, I won't call them protests because protests are legal and organized, but some of the people that insert themselves in processes and create the destruction that happens in our cities. These type things should be discussed over in our urban regional planning areas. They should be discussed in our business models as to how the businesses, what are the impacts of all of these actions on various of our different areas that are in higher ed. How does this really impact our nursing students? How does this impact our business students? How does this impact our architecture students when you're talking about the crime prevention through environmental design? How are we designing things? What's the impact from a public policy standpoint or an insurance standpoint? Because when you talk to some of these cities, these riots can cause them to go bankrupt because insurance companies are no longer insuring businesses. The housing insurance is going up, car rates are going up. So a lot of city managers are dealing with those from other levels. And I think that when we can start showing everyone where we all have a vested interest in addressing this issue, then we can really work closer with law enforcement to come up with some better solutions to the true problems that we're having in society.
Thank you. Dr. McGill, what have you all done to address your curriculum based on the current social climate?
So I oversee law enforcement and correctional training here at the college, and the current climate has certainly created more conversation as to what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. But one of the things that I've really delved into, I teach legal a lot when I have an opportunity. And one of the things I really delve into is constitutional law and basic understanding of what the Constitution requires, especially First Amendment. And so we've started talking a lot about that and pushing that issue as to when can we talk out and when can we have freedom of speech. And so instilling that in these new students who will soon be law enforcement officers serving communities is a big deal for me. That's one of my big pushes. We also have a class on diversity and communication. And one of the things that we've actually instilled in those classes is exercises, role play exercises where the training officers, the trainees are getting up and having to have interactions and do role play to sort some of these things out with how do you make contact with somebody who's from a different ethnic group or a different sexual orientation or whatever it is, and how do you interact with them, and how do you correct whatever the issue is, whatever they're coming to you, because people come to the cops with a problem. They want us to provide some kind of solution for it, and so teaching new students, new trainees how to do that is another big step for us.
Thank you. So, Dr. McGill, I'm going to put you on the seat again for this next question. And gentlemen, please, after this, please jump in. The law, some of you may or may not know, but the Law Enforcement Academy, in the Law Enforcement Academy program in the state of Florida, students are required to complete no more than 770 clock hours, in addition to passing the state certification exam to be employed in the state of Florida. Now, on the other hand, a cosmetology student, which we love our cosmetologists and barbers, they are required to complete 1,200 clock hours and pass a state certification. So now we're talking somebody has a gun compared to, scissors and chemicals. Well, chemicals are dangerous too. Why do you think there's such a disparity in the number of hours within those types of programs? Why are there so few hours in a law enforcement academy program?
So this is a very large conversation that I'll try to limit. But it goes back to the idea, and I believe it was Robert Kennedy that said that society gets the kind of law enforcement it demands. And so if you look across the world and how we train law enforcement officers in different countries, there are some countries that it's a minimum of a 2-year degree for you to be a basic law enforcement officer. And so society at this point here in the United States, we've accepted this type of training and this type of qualification for our law enforcement officers. If you want more training and more or better trained officers, then certainly society needs to demand it. And it has to come from legislation, because legislation is what sets our standard. They've marked down it with Florida Administrative Code that says these are how many hours and this is what class you're going to teach. So society, if they want different training for their officers, they have to make that mandatory. There's been discussion back and forth as to whether or not officers should have a 2-year degree or have a 4-year degree. And you'll see that as the change in professionalism occurs. But right now we've not demanded that, and until we all get on board and push that direction, I think we're going to be looking at this same process for years to come.
I would love to jump in there on that one. It's kind of interesting, and it's kind of like society says, and as we in education know, words are very powerful. So in your question, you asked, you said there are no more than 700 hours required in law enforcement. No, that's not a completely accurate sentence. We just say that there are 700. And then when we say there are the 1,200 hours in cosmetology, how come the question isn't, dog, how come y'all need 1,200 hours in cosmetology? Y'all can't get finished in 700 like law enforcement? But that's not the conversation. So they could be in many of the cosmetology schools, I believe. Are there many cosmetology schools that are held in public institutions, or most of them private? How many?
They're public and private, but this is actually based on the curriculum, the Florida Department of Education curriculum framework standards. So
Right.
that is my question. Why isn't it higher? And why is cosmetology 1,200 and not 500? And so absolutely, you are absolutely right. That is the question.
You see, and so then when I look at it, I agree with what Dr. McGill was stating in terms of what's required in terms of the number of hours, but I also don't want us to be confused, because it's very easy to compare 700 to 1,200, but I personally haven't looked at to see what is included in the 1,200 hours of instruction in cosmetology. I don't know what's included in there. I do know what's included in the 700 of law enforcement and the various things that we have. And if you look at the evolution of law enforcement, when we start out as just a job and now becoming a profession with putting in the standards, we've increased the number of hours that have been in the academy, because it hasn't always been 700 hours. And then also when you're looking at what we're dealing with in the academies, it's kind of interesting, quite honestly, because I can agree with you what you're saying in terms of us having relatively young individuals, 19 years old in some cases, that now have the authority and the power to remove people's rights and to take a life if we're at that point of deadly force. There's a lot of things that actually go into those curriculums and that training. And what I'd like us also to look at is that when we're going through the law enforcement training and we're asking what goes on, as Doc said, there are many facets to this. One, you look at it, the facet of, one, what are the requirements in your particular jurisdiction? Because there's certain things, we just went through a conversation here at Fort Lauderdale where we increased hours from the high school diploma and GED to the AA. And it's kind of interesting when you look at it, because many times they talk about reducing the number of minorities if they increase the educational requirements. But I've taken that to task in some organizations. I said, because I know in our organization, all of the blacks, the brown and black folk, when we got here, we had the educational requirements and far exceeded the others that didn't, due to how recruitment goes in law enforcement and the dominant here. So the hiring of educational requirements hasn't been shown to negatively impact minorities. So we have the degrees. So we're looking at, if I have a degree, then I need the 700 hours, then I guess one of those things, like Doc said, we need to sit down and talk with each other and see what is really necessary in the academy. And if there are other things that you want to have in the academy to increase the hours, I think would be a great discussion, because we haven't been talking about what isn't included as to why we need to have more than 700 hours.
Can I jump in there to add to the requirements? Little history of Alex Jordan. I worked at the Department of Business Professional Regulations for about 10 years, from 2004 to 2013. And I was over the licensing unit for a while. That's barbers, cosmetologists, real estate, all those professional license, CPAs. And there's roughly like 400 hours that are lecture for the cosmetology requirements. And the rest of them are for labs. So of course, when you talked about make sure that the chemicals are mixed properly so that someone doesn't get the hair burn, all those. But then when you look at the 700 hours for law enforcement, correct me if I'm wrong, Gil and Woods, those 700 hours are more lecture hours versus also the additional hand-on requirement for law enforcement that supersede what the 1200 versus the 700 truly looks like. So when you look at that additionally, you may only have about, and then also cosmetology, you're not required to have a degree to pursue that profession. So that's another differential that is also, that takes place. And then also understanding that, you know, the liability that comes along with the additional training that law enforcement is required to do, also from Alex Jordan's perspective, also separates the difference in those 1200 versus the 700 hours.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that difference, because in our training academy does not include the field training officer program, which is another extension, sometimes up to 6 months additional training, that if you're talking about hands-on with the 400 in cosmetology, I don't know whether or not you want to now add on the FTO program, which the officer is riding with another officer and not doing the job on their own. So if we add in those hands-on hours to the 700 hours, now you will see that if we're comparing, as you stated, Mr. Jordan, apples to apples in training, when you're really by yourself, you'll see that we far exceed the 700 hours as stated in the curriculum.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to make sure that I at least share some of Alex Jordan administration background that I have been involved with that profession before. So it's critical that we also, that's apples to apples, green versus red apples, or oranges and apples. So
I think my concern is that we do have some agencies that still don't have FTO programs. And I know what we produce out of the academy, because I commonly tell them, I have now prepared you to play high school baseball. You understand the rules of the game, but I've sent you out to the streets and you're in the major leagues now. And this is a different thing. And so if they go to agencies that don't have field training programs, which I love the field training program. I went through one myself. I think it's a requirement, or should be a requirement, but each individual chief and sheriff gets to choose what their field training officer program looks like. And so what that officer is getting varies dramatically across the country.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to bring this up. And I know we're talking apples and oranges, but I think what Dr. McGill brought up, and it shows that there's some differences even within the state of Florida, how the training is taught and how deep they're able to go. So Mr. Jordan, you are spot on. The lecture piece is the critical piece. That's one of the major components of what they are receiving as far as education wise. But I do know with some prior conversations, there are some elements because of that requirement. Some things may not be, some things may be missing in some areas in our state colleges and technical centers.
So I got just a second, Ms. Jackson. I want to go back to one thing about the academy that my colleagues failed to mention is that, the police academy is 80%. You have to score at least an 80 to pass any test in our police academy. Yep. Anywhere else in the college, you can get a 75 and you can graduate. You can get a degree, get to 75. 75 in the police academy gets you kicked out.
Right.
It's the level of expectation is also very high at the police academies for all the tests. I mean, everything they do in the academy, it has to be at least an 80 for them to pass. If they make a 79, they're gone. At least that's what it was when I went through. Now, sometimes there's other extenuating circumstances, they might get the test again, but that's the level of which you have to pass in our Police and Corrections Academy is an 80%. And that's pretty high. So that's not like, so just to say that those hours might not be the same, but the level of expectation is extremely high as far as passing our academies. And like I said, Dr. McGill made it very clear is that, and him and Dr. Sands both said, I mean, once they leave the academy, that's just the start of
correct
advanced training. They're still, most people are still, 3 to 6 months, sometimes 9 months before they ever sit in a patrol car by themselves. So the training still goes on. There's a lot of testing. I know we do a lot of testing with our FTO program. So they'll not just get out the academy for the most part, get a gun, and then they head off to do work by themselves. Those that do that, I really wish they would stop those practices and go to having a real dedicated field training program. So it's those are apples and oranges when you try to. I understand what they say about cosmetology, but cosmetology and police training are different.
So let me ask you this. So with that training,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sorry, my light's about to go out. Are our students able to, are you as within the curriculum is able to be modified to add topics just like what's going on, what we're talking about, the social climate? So is diversity, inclusion, and equity issues and the need to develop de-escalation trainings and is it able to be taught, or is this something that's taught after a student leaves?
Well, that's a very good question. Matter of fact, my boss, Captain Chief Book, he actually said they actually worked on the actual police academy curriculum this past year. And part of that is talking about what do they need to add, what things they need to take away to make sure that they're keeping up with the times. So the answer to your question is that, yeah, they actually worked on the curriculum, actually to modify it. Now, and of course, once you leave the academy, definitely, and your FTO program, we definitely can actually modify it to mirror what is going on in the society. Yes, definitely. But we do actually have diversity training in the academy, but I would definitely like to see more scenario-based actual training if we could modify that in our academy. I think that's one thing that we should do more of is scenario training. And for those that don't know, it's actually role playing. And whether you do it with the simulator or with actual actors, you do more where you have more decision making, and I think that part we could actually grow in our training facilities. I won't go on and on how great our training facility is at Santa Fe because we got state of the art actual training facility that they just developed. And it's really good as far as helping with decision making, scenario based training.
Ms. Jackson, if I might, I was looking at our catalog at our law enforcement officer program here at Chipola College, and we have interactions in a diverse community, which is 40 hours. So that is, I know at least at Chipola in our, there is one class that would, I think, apply to some of this, so there is some of it built into it now, but just FYI.
That's the standard for the state.
Right.
That's good to know that it's a part of the state standards. And so the question now is, how does that articulate into the communities? So how do we foster in the classroom a conscience of a vehicle for social change and a space for hope? So as the educators, how do we do this?
Right here. I got in my office this morning and the assistant put something on my desk prior to me getting here. And I don't know if everyone could see this, but it talks about the Florida laws. That's where it all starts at. Because if we don't have these change, going back to all 4 questions that you guys talked about, Gil talked about the curriculum requirements, Chief Woods, Captain Woods just mentioned the same thing, and as well, Brother Salters just mentioned, it starts with the laws, because there's a lot of inconsistency that is kind of gray that has to be addressed. So if we don't get back to what I mentioned earlier in our first question about how we're getting our community involved with the laws and the issues that are impacting them, and how we as our state colleges being mindful of what is impacting our colleges based off the laws that currently exist. And so we have to be it has to be a two-way. You know, the pendulum got to go one way to address the other one. So at some point we become balanced. We're never going to be balanced, but it has to not be so gray as a lot of the things that we're encountering right now on our climate that is going on right now. That would just want to share that.
And I agree with that foundation, because we have to have a solid foundation of what we're teaching, what we're recruiting. And one thing also, I don't know whether we can classify it as the elephant in the room, but we also must look at who's instructing these courses. Because sometimes you can have a course with a well-intentioned title, but then the instructor comes in and basically devalues the course. It's kind of like, I'm sure y'all have heard in the academy, okay, that's what you did in the academy, now we're on the street, you know? So sometimes those things occur. And it's kind of like when I was in the academy, what even spurred me to go back and teach, and as Brother Jordan was stating, I've taught in the academy. I have been out there for years. I teach, I've done that. I've been over our recruitment and different things. But when I was in the academy, I never forget the instructor that came in to teach ethics. He literally came in and said, "Good morning. This is a dry subject. It's in our curriculum. We got to get through it. So let's do it." That was what he opened up the class on ethics. So now what does that tell the new recruit about how important ethics is or is not to the profession? And that's their introduction to ethics. And ethics, we were with him for some hours. So you have that many hours and that not being there. So if you have the laws and you have the well-intentioned curriculum, but if your facilitator puts it out like that, it kind of diminishes it. And that's the same thing we've seen the way some look at diversity training. Some individuals think that we should not even be teaching diversity training, you know? So if you have it coming from on high that we should not be teaching diversity training, and you also have different presidential endorsements by different policing groups, it tends to tell you the mindset or philosophy behind the profession.
Well, that goes back to a lot of other training, you know, the sensitivity, the sensitive training, culture training, all those things play as a role, special ethics. I mean, that's the first thing that a law enforcement officer does. He interact with his community. He interact with the individual who may be a suspect. But then if you don't have an idea on his culture versus what individual who may not have a cultural issue, but those are things that are so sensitive. How do I address someone who may have a cultural difference and how they're being addressed respectively in an ethical manner, as Mental Salters mentioned there, is very critical on how we also police our campuses, but also how we're policing in our community. That all ties back to social justice matters, no matter where we at, no matter. And I don't care how you chop it up. It's in our community, it's on our campuses, and it's how we're policing it and how we're addressing it. Sensitive, looking at it from a cultural standpoint, or looking at it from an ethical standpoint on how I am ensuring that I'm being fair and that social justice matters to everyone. Doesn't matter, black, red, blue, green, but it has to matter.
So you bring up a great topic, because recently, I'm not sure if anybody is aware of what just happened in Philadelphia recently regarding the African-American male who is bipolar and was actually shot and killed this week. Thinking about situations such as this, and when people of color have been shot, what and it goes, and I know it's a big conversation and it's bigger than what I'm about to say, but how I know there's sometimes say comply. And you know, you brought up the law, you brought up the Constitution, and they say, okay, if we just comply, and sometimes even when you comply, some things may happen. So what do you, how should the community react? How should students on campuses react? How or respond? And what role does higher education play in this, in educating our community and knowing what is the right steps to take? Because we are profiled. I know I've been profiled. My daughter's been profiled. And And we, as people of color, sometimes I know I can be loud sometimes, and that can be considered aggressive. So just because the nature of us as a culture, people don't understand how we may respond or react or sound. So are those kind of conversations discussed in academics, and to guide the students through this process? And when you have instructors who may not be people of color having this conversation, who do they call? Who addresses these types of things? And do you bring other people in to have those conversations when you may not have the right person?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, not say a good question. That's an excellent question, because it also ties back to what Ms. Marshall was inquiring about. Mental health. Who do we call in? We have law enforcement gentleman who's on the street who may be in the 2-year in. The ethics of that course was very blah, and he did not really feel that his ethics on interacting with someone who has a disability is being truly sensitive to that individual disability, or they just taking advantage of this guy and throwing him in the back seat of the car and allowing them not to really understand the issues that that individual may be having. So when we look back at it as a whole, we must identify what is really truly the demographic makeup of our community sometimes. Because when we look at what's going on in Madison versus what's going on down in Fort Lauderdale, or maybe going over there in Northwest Florida, we got 2 totally different communities, 3 different type of communities that I just brought out. How do we make up our law enforcement? Do our law enforcement mirror our community? Does our community mirror our law enforcement? So that we understand what kind of cultural diversity issues that we may have. And when we're dealing with some individual, like the individual that happened up in Philly area this past week, so that we understand how the role we play in our community is very important. So that's kind of how I just wanted to share and kick that off.
And if I may, when we're asking what type of training is in law enforcement, it's just like Dr. McGill stated. You're going to find different levels of training at various law enforcement agencies beyond the training academy. For instance, I've gone through the crisis intervention training where we went through, I believe it was almost 40 hours with psychologists, community activists, mental health professionals, dealing with how do you recognize, how do you treat, how do you de-escalate, how do you recognize individuals that may be going through an episode. And you can go through all those types of training. But then also when you look at it, when we're in law enforcement, whether the individual is having mental health issues or whether or not they are having aggressive issues or whether or not they are intending bodily harm to us, the harm to us would be the same regardless of what the person's mental state is or whatever. And when you look at the actual tapes from the Philadelphia case, I think that you'll see that the officers were backing up, trying to get the guy to put down the knife, He keeps charging them and this type of stuff. And you even heard the individual that called the police said they were trying to get the individual to stop. So, I mean, it's a very interesting position because I don't know if in fact a mental health professional would have been able to get him to drop the knife, or whether we would have had a mental health professional that would have been harmed because of that, and we would have ended up in the same situation. And I think in some cases we have conversations to where, yes, I will definitely acknowledge mental health professionals definitely have more hours and more intimate contact with individuals at a mental health state than most law enforcement officers. But I don't know if in fact they would be the answer to all of the situations, as people seem to assert that if you just sent a mental health professional, it would have changed the entire situation. It could have made the situation worse. I've been in some situations to where the mental health professionals have been there on hostage cases, and our hostage negotiators have been mental health professionals and actually talking with individuals. And sometimes in those cases, it still ended up with the individual being lethal force was needed for the individual. So, I mean, we're having to work together. And as you said, Mr. Jordan, dealing with what do we have in the community that can help us all deal with these issues. And I do agree with you, Marcia, that the mental health professionals do have tools to assist in those cases. And that's why, as we state, we are a community. And as I saw on Facebook the other day, it was a picture of a Native American, and it said, does everyone realize that the left wing and the right wing are on the same bird? And I think a lot of times we forget that. So whether it's a mental health professional, whether it's law enforcement, firefighters, higher ed, we're all in this community together, and we're trying to make our whole community safe. It's just a matter of us valuing each other's profession and coming together and collaborate to address the issues, as opposed to what seems to happen so many times as people have been looking at fault and pointing the finger, and nobody wants the finger to be pointed at them.
You are absolutely right. That's Dr. You are spot on. But I do have a question with that. So with that opportunity to protect and serve, that also comes with the opportunity to enforce power over
Correct.
a situation.
Correct.
So how do you all address the sensitivity or the privilege of that power that an individual has now after receiving all this training? And we're going past the 77 hours of training in the academy. Now we're into the professional development setting. We're on college campuses. So now you have the power and the privilege to enforce the law. So what is also done to ensure that that is done in an equitable fashion?
Okay, and what I'll do is I'll take it to me personally, because I can't take responsibility for what others are doing. What it is, when I mentioned that in the police academy, that's when I said I need to make a change. And I believe that, kind of like Gandhi stated, you have to be the change you want to see. So I saw that what was going on with ethics, so I began teaching ethics. I taught it on all levels. I taught it at many agencies out there in the police academy. When you talk about human diversity, I get in there and you're able to open up and talk to people from different backgrounds to show them both sides of it. And I think the trick is, just like with higher education, when is it that people drop out of school? They drop out when they see that there is no need for what it is they're seeking, or they don't think they're going to graduate. So us that are in higher ed, what do? We're showing them the value of their education and how it's going to benefit their lives once we find out what it is they want to do. We find out their why and show them how it's going to help them. So what I've done there, even right now in my agency, I'm looking at this saying, what could I bring that would allow everybody to come to the room and talk? So the class procedural justice, I started bringing that in. But when I teach procedural justice, I teach it with a slant towards cultural competence. So I add that piece in there. So that's not in the actual curriculum, but because of my lived experiences, I want you to understand, when we talk about being fair, when we're talking about giving voice, when we're talking about being impartial, those are things that we have to do and lay it over everything that we deal with. And so then when you look at procedural justice, the ultimate goal is officer safety. So I got something that everybody inside the organization can relate to, everything that the public can relate to, and then we begin to move that forward and can bring in all of the other layers that we know that we need to have.
Excellent.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
One thing I want to piggyback on, as far as, saying, what can you do? Well, as a police agency, you have to set the culture. And we talking about higher ed, I speak to each one of our new employees, and not just the police employees. I'm talking about all Santa Fe employees. I speak to them on our orientation. And one thing I always try to tell them, and I will tell everybody that's on this call, that's a member of AFC, we all got the same job. We might have different descriptions of what we do, but it's the same job. The same job that everybody that steps foot on any one of these campuses is to help facilitate those individuals that come to us to succeed in their educational endeavors. And if that's not our core value, then we're in the wrong place. That's where it starts. So as a law enforcement agency, if my officers don't buy into that, then they don't need to be on our campus, because they have to be part of our campus, have to realize that the whole reason you're here is to help that person graduate from this college. And if that isn't part of what you get up and do in the morning, then this is the wrong culture. And we push that, and Chief Book, he can echo this. We are part of our community. We are not set apart from it. That's why we attend. If we didn't have a pandemic, odds are I'd be out at one of our venues, because all our officers, we try to attend everything we can as part of the college community, not because we're the police. That's secondary. Of course, we're there to protect and serve, but we're there because that's what we are. We're Santa Fe. And if we're Santa Fe, we need to act like we're Santa Fe, which means we are dialed in. We care about our community. And that and you're amazed how much feedback we get from just being there, hanging out, being part of whatever event we have. Now, some of the other ones dance. I used to try to dance with them, and I'm old now, so they be laughing at me, so I don't dance no more. But that's part of it, just being there, you know. I've judged the contest now. We got a dance contest now. I do that kind of stuff. And they call it, hey, you're going to be to the event. Not because I'm Captain Woods, but because I work at Santa Fe and I'm part of this community. And that's what you have to do. You have to change the culture. If you want, like you say, if you want it to change, then you have to get in there and be part of it and really care, because people see whether you care or not. And that's how you do it.
You're spot on. You have to be, if you want to see the change, you have to be a change agent.
That's it, exactly.
And some of those things are not embedded, and you have to want to do that. I have seen some students myself who have gone through, and you know, I believe higher education is a place for enlightenment as well, for students to see that they may not have grown up that way, but ultimately being in this environment, they are able to be experiencing and exposed to different diverse populations. So that leads me to this question. In the age of social media, how has that impacted the academies and the workforce? Because we talk about freedom of speech. We talk about, I have my rights or this, my rights or that. I remember one of our former college presidents, he said, don't be in the newspaper. He did not, if it better be good if you're in the newspaper. So what do you all see as the biggest impact regarding social media for your candidates, for your academies, as well as in the profession of public safety?
I'll jump in there because that's coming in the class that I'm teaching right now. We're talking about procedural justice and how things actually occur. And I think that many times people forget the algorithm and how social media works. So when you're in higher ed, if you have a whole bunch of individuals that are talking about everything that the cops do is bad, you have this shooting that happens in Philadelphia. So if all of us share that with each other on here and we share one other thing, now social media and the algorithm will be sending you things where the cops have done things that are bad. So now the conversation would be, gee, Dr. McGill, the cops are really messing up. Every time I open up my phone, every time I open up my laptop, every time I open up my iPad, the cops are doing something stupid. Here it is. Look at it. And you're like, wow, yeah, it is. But while we're over here talking about everything that the cops are doing are great, every time we open up our phone, our iPad, talking about, look at all the great stuff cops are doing. But you have to also look at their profession. Cops by nature don't post everything that we do that's out there because we are public servants. We aren't out there as we would be in the private industry where we're needing to advertise everything that we do that's positive. So if we aren't putting out the positive and the negative out there with the algorithms and social media, that's going to be revving around there. And when people are looking at it and dealing with things on an emotional level, they aren't trying to figure out the algorithm of how Facebook, Instagram, and social media works. Because even if you look at it, when Facebook first started and they were up there at school, it didn't start taking off until they started talking about people. That's when it actually took off. When it was just being a fact-based thing, it was dying. So now when you're into higher ed, I think that we need to have an education and talk with people about how does social media really work and what is it really designed to do. We also need to start telling people, when is the last time you posted something positive about law enforcement? When is the last time that law enforcement did anything positive? That and this is what we dealt with in the class that was very heated with some officers. One individual, when we were talking about law enforcement and what's happening in the community, he says, people don't realize that we have great-great-grandparents and we've been doing law enforcement for years. And I had to tell him, I say, everybody got great-great-grandparents, and some of us great-great-grandparents had a different experience with law enforcement than yours. And yours may have been the reason mine had theirs. And oftentimes, as I stated in our first call, is that we also have to deal with the history of law enforcement in America, as opposed to going back to Sir Robert Peel that was in Europe. That's not the history of law enforcement in America. We need to deal with it as that, because it was when law enforcement was being used to bring back the property of the owners and stuff. So you go back then, we can go through the slave trade and how it was. So we really need to look at our history books and see if we're really teaching the history of law enforcement. And it hasn't been so long. And just as others have stated, I bet that you can go on this call right here, and you go to the various police departments that are represented here and that police these agencies, and I bet they may have the first Black at their agencies now. And some of them may not even have a Black officer on their agencies. I'm down here in South Florida, and I know there's some agencies down here that have the first Black almost everything in their police departments.
Mm-hmm. So thank you for that. Let's take it a step further. Mr. Jordan, I want to pose this to you. So when we're talking about social media, let's talk about on the student side. How do we assess their social media? What should we be looking for if we see something on a student's social media page, a potential law enforcement? They haven't even gone through the program yet. They haven't completed the program yet. And there may be something. Is it a right? Is it their right to have it on their social media page? They're going to protect and serve?
Right. But if and that's a great question. So in 2018, Captain Woods and Chief Book and the rest of the colleges worked on a new policy for their respective institution, and it was the campus free expression policy. Okay. And that was a law that was passed. And as I mentioned, that's in this new book. And it was in 2018. Okay. And Captain Woods, if you remember that you were part of working on that project with Chief Book. And so when we have our colleges that has this new policy that is required by law, that students can protest without being required to go in the back of the gymnasium at Santa Fe in the woods somewhere to protest. But this new law now allows you to protest anywhere on campus. There's no zone anymore. So if I'm a student who's in the academy that has concerns on social justice in this day of climate, not in 2018, but this was going on and this was propelled before 2018. It's just pressure bust a pipe, as they would say, as my grandmother used to say. So when it hits the fan, it's time to address it. But with that policy and those new laws that went in place, if I'm a student and I have some issues that pertain to social justice and I'm out there, protesting, I got my sign and I got my concerns, but then 2 years later, Director McGill said, hey, wasn't that gentleman out there calling us, all kind of names and considering us not, supporting what the community issues are truly are? Do I then stereotype him as a bad apple, or do I stereotype him as a gentleman who just wanted to get their concerns addressed in a respectful manner? That particular new policy states that I can voice my opinion anywhere on campus, but I should not be penalized for me wanting, some social justice. So I think that when we go back and look at and screening individuals' threats, totally different than me talking about equality and equity and social justice. Now, when we have these histories of threats on social media that the law enforcement and the federal government are screening, definitely it's going to impact their workforce for opportunities for a job. Definitely should not be doing that if you're talking about serving and protecting our communities. So I would take those as in considerations as two different things: issues that I have about my community, or am I threatening somebody about that I don't like the police officers and, saying all these slanders about them. So we have to be careful and mindful when we're individuals who are looking for jobs in law enforcement, that we have not kind of, burned those bridges in our pursuit of being out there in our community. Because I tell my kids, be mindful about what you put on Instagram and Facebook and all of that, because these college recruits are going to take that in consideration. So I have one that's about to graduate from Florida A&M, strike at Salters. And then I have one that's about to go to college, going to Grambling State. So I told him, hey, be careful about what you're texting your friends, you're putting on your social media, because that is being considered something that the coaches are looking at, no longer talking about what law enforcement has in mind when they're looking at recruits and going back and looking at the history. Because all of us who've been in law enforcement, myself as an officer before, as McGill and Salters and the rest who's on this call, they go and look back at that and see what our history, kind of shows kind of apples that we've been. We've been green apples, or we've been good red apples. And I like golden apples. So again, we just have to be careful about that.
You're right, because it also has the ability to show temperament. And so again, I'm gonna do it apples and orange. I know it's an apple and orange, but when you're talking about temperament, you're talking about personality, and you can express, you can show your expression of your temperament through what you post. So I would not want somebody, a dentist or a hygienist in my mouth with who has a bad temperament and doesn't want to really deal with people.
Mhm.
So the same thing can be said about you know, a hairstylist. I know I've experienced bad people in my head that hurt my hair.
I have that problem.
And she didn't want to deal with natural hair, so I can't even
I
go
see
back to a
that.
hairstylist now. And so I believe in temperament, and
Yes.
you see temperament, you see patterns of temperament throughout the process of students going through academies. Do you all address that? Do you all see that? And when you see temperament, whether it's blatant, it's right there, you can see trends with their temperament that you can see, oh, well, they may be a little bit too aggressive, or you see it on social media or some other way. How do you handle that type of situation?
If I may, one, I want to tell you, Brother Jordan, I agree with what you're stating in terms of letting people know what the consequences of their actions may be, because sometimes I think that can be more effective than trying to hit them over the head with a law, rule, or policy, because the way that our millennials are now, they are challenging laws, rules, and policies. So I think you have to show them where it will impact them, which is the same thing in law enforcement. When we see these temperaments and so on and so forth, we begin to talk to them about how it may impact them. So Ms. Jackson, to answer your question directly, when you're dealing with things and you're in the academy and you're in a probationary period, we have a lot stronger ability to address the issue and get the individual out of the job. However, some individuals are so astute that they keep those things under wraps until the minute they're off of probation. So then now they have a legal right to the job. And so now you're dealing with all types of stuff. And I'm sure you can deal with and can relate to some people that they are just evil, mean, and nasty, but not fireable. So if they're just miserable people after probation, the options that I have, you can send them to many classes as you want. You can send them to many diversity classes as you want. You can send them to as many verbal judos and all this other type stuff until you can actually talk to them and find out what their why is. That is what I found out to be the biggest reason, is the finding out their why. Just like in the class, I asked everybody what's most important to them in their life. And they were telling me, and I said, so that means every action that you take, you need to be considering how it's going to impact your most valuable thing in your life. And we had one officer in there that told me his daughter's name was Grace. I said, so right now, if I see you acting a little bit sideways, I'm going to just walk past you and I'm going to just say, how is Grace doing? And that's my key word. I'm not going to say anything else. So when you talk about that behavior, and then the other thing that you have to look at, that looks aggressive to us, is it aggressive within the culture, as Captain Wood stated? Because in some agencies and in some units within agencies, the aggressiveness is the culture of that particular deal. Because when you go through it, sometimes people, when we in the academy, we talk about having command presence.
Mm-hmm.
Some individuals confuse command presence with acting, let's just say acting, overly acting, let's just say. Acting like a part of the anatomy that they'd rather not.
Power tripping.
Yeah, and they do that. And I give them the analogy. Some of them got their lunches taken in pre-K, kindergarten, all the way up through their doctorate, get a badge, and now they're captain or captain courageous, and they do things that cause the rest of us to have to come get a foot removed from them. But that's because now they're in a badge. Yeah. And so we have to deal with it that particular way. And a lot of times, some people are so smart that where they don't have anything that will give you enough to discipline them. You know, so it's just like when we're having these, and if you Google right now, you talk about things happening with students. FIU just had a student that posted something on social media that was derogatory. It's in the news today. When you talk about Fort Lauderdale, we had officers posting racist videos, and we found out because the girlfriend told us. Because now you have to think about it. We have to work with the community to be our eyes and ears when cops are doing stuff, because they might not do it in front of any of us that's on the panel. So we have to have our relationship with the community and have an environment that the community realizes that we will listen to their voice so that we can all do a little bit better out here.
Yep.
This has been great. and I knew it was going to happen. We've come to the end. So I do want to leave a little time now for some questions. So if anybody on the Zoom wants to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put your question in the chat box, and we would like to open it up.
Hey, I have a question. This is Avi over at Pensacola State College. So I'm actually, and good morning, everyone. I'm actually kind of going back and thinking about the topics that you said about, you know, those that kind of post things on social media for kind of everybody else to see. So I guess, are we kind of saying there's really no way to address that? Like when you see that and then you bring it up to either law enforcement or someone, you know, that your supervisor or something that's above you, is that not addressed? Is that person not, are they not spoken to about it? Or like, what is the protocol for that? So I know we've experienced that a few times at my institution, and you know, we've had students that are in fields that are going to be taking care of people, such as healthcare and nursing, and we're just like, why are they still in the program? So from outside looking in, you know, you're like, well, why are you not removed? Because I feel like if I did that, I would have been removed.
Well, you're bringing up a lot of different layers in that as to why you may have been addressed and others may not. We can bring up the race issue. We can bring up sexisms. We can also bring those things up. And then as Mr. Jordan stated, it would really depend on the post. You have some that know how to skirt the little post to where it's nothing that would be fireable or that you can really discipline for, but it definitely lets you know. And sometimes it can even be, as you just saw, the New York City police officer that was yelling 2020, Trump, Trump 2020 from his police car and playing it over his loudspeaker. And when it was being videoed that they were putting on Instagram, he was discussing tough guy, tough guy. So that's a case that's going on right now that I think we could kind of situate in your question. So with that, yes, NYPD is addressing it and looking at it, but now what it is that they will do dealing with First Amendment rights and what you can do in uniform using the police equipment or not is all going to come into question, you see. And that's one that we have that's fresh that I think addresses or deals with your question.
I think it just kind of, it kind of discourages. I feel that, you know, when like I said, when I'm going to say, put it, when a civilian has reported something, we don't see any action taking place, and then we stop and think, well, if that was me, something would have happened. It discourages us from saying anything because, you know, now, you know, as they say, you know, you tell, or, you know, I forget the saying, but sometimes, you know, if you go and report something, you know, you now put more issue on yourself because now they know, okay, so and such reported something, but yet nothing was done, and now there's that retaliation factor. I mean, it's almost like a delicate balance.
It is, and that's why I said the issue can also be race, because a lot of times when you look at it right now, a lot of Black police officers that have gotten out of the FOP. The FOP has endorsed President Trump, and so a lot of Blacks and those that are against that are in the unions have basically said, wait a minute, how do we do that? And just like with the issue up there in New York with that cop, it was a white cop, Black cop saying, don't you try that. You might not turn out the same way. So we have those things that are going on that are out there that we have to address. And that's why we even get back to the basic thing of voting. Are you a registered voter? Does that allows you to sit on these particular juries? And then as a citizen, are you voting to make sure that the people in place have the same views you do with addressing these issues, or don't they?
And can I jump in real quick? And this is a very good question that you presented. 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with the chief of police here in Tallahassee, who's been getting a lot of heat on variations of things. And in my role in the community, I try to be involved from kids or from adult issues, whatever it may be. I'm highly involved. That's why I'm an alpha man, Dr. Salters. But with that said, I shared with Chief Revel that the communication issue from his office in the city hall to our community is an issue that I've heard from individuals who oversee NAACP locally, from our other community activists, and as well just people as a whole. And the concern is that when there's a Black issue, it may not be communicated back out to the community what transpired. But if it's a white issue in the communication is going out to the community. And why I bring that up is at the Capitol about 2 months ago, there was a protest, a gentleman pulled out a gun. There was a whole bunch of issues that transpired. Marcia and the rest of you here in Tallahassee would know what I'm talking about. So when that issue was brought up to the chief of police about what was going on, there was no level of communication back out to the Black community on the similar fashion that would happen with that white individual. So communication as a whole must be across the board when we're dealing with law enforcement on issues, when there's someone not to be retaliated on. If I have the luxury to call the chief of police and talk with him about the community issues, but if somebody else talking about it, that their community-based area get retaliated because of what they're sharing their concerns with. So I think that goes back to the communication level must be as a whole fair and equal. I see you there.
Thank you.
I see you, Ms. Jackson.
Well, to piggyback on what Mr. Jordan was saying, one thing about agencies we need to do at the leadership level is be transparent. If we are disciplining these folks, we need to be transparent and let them know, yeah, this person was dealt with and this is the outcome of this investigation. You have to be transparent. You can't just say, oh, we're taking care of it. No, tell them exactly, because if that person don't need to be a cop, then be honest and say that person don't need to be a cop. I mean, we have a lot of leadership that needs to just step to the front and say, yeah, we need to get rid of the ones that don't need to be here. And we and I'm a small agency, so I know every one of them individually. So I ain't no problem getting rid of one of them if they don't have the standards of which we need here at Santa Fe.
Right.
That's just not across the board. I wish we would take more of a leadership role, because leaders mean you have to take those tough decisions. And sometimes tough decisions mean you need to get rid of an officer that on paper is great, but is that the right person for the culture you're trying to develop at your institution? You know, because everybody that got out of police academy don't need to wear a badge. I'm just gonna be honest on that one. And find who has the right fit for your agency. And if they ain't, then they need to go. It's just that simple, you know.
Captain Woods, I want to tell you, I commend you on what you're stating, and the transparency is a big issue, because how many times have we seen it to where you just don't see an officer anymore and people think that they are on vacation when in fact they've been suspended? Because we, in the culture in internal affairs, we do not really go out there and publicize all of the things that have happened with officers. But if you would really like to know, since we're in the state of Florida, you can go to FDLE's website, and it's the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. And they have the proceedings so that you can see what officers have been disciplined for in the state of Florida. So that's it deals with your sworn officers, it deals with corrections and probation. So you can see what has been brought up to the commission, what is happening. And I think it would be a little bit enlightening to you all to see some of that. So that's FDLE, the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Board. And also, Captain Woods, when you teach the procedural justice, I would also encourage you all, Google procedural justice. And when you go to their website, it has a little short video there that will talk to you a little bit about things and talk to you about the pillars of procedural justice. And one of them is the issue of transparency. Because if you all notice, what is one of the biggest questions you've asked, and even if you add when OB, you were asking all of the questions that have been asked, people are asking for transparency. You want to see, you want to know what is the process? How do you all do this? In every situation, is how do you do it? When you talk about Philadelphia right now, you're like, what is the process? Can you do this? How do we deal with this? What do we put in place? So dealing with procedural justice, I think that will lay a whole groundwork for everything that we're doing, because even though it is a criminal justice process are situated there, the issue of procedure is on everything that we do. And in the class, when I teach it, I even talk about Chick-fil-A. When you go to Chick-fil-A, you're going to get food at the end, just like you will at other restaurants. But the process at Chick-fil-A is so much better than the process at the other places. You'll wait in line to get that sandwich because the process is there. Same thing when you go to Publix. There are people up there, if they got a long line, they're going to have managers and people that sweeping the floor getting up there at the cash register, where other people have people hiding and it seems like they can't get anybody to take your money. It's all about the process. So Captain Woods, I would encourage you, and I don't mind talking with you offline where we can actually talk about procedural justice, laying those things out there. And even if we want me to come on and we do a lesson in procedural justice on one of the calls so everyone here can have a better idea of it, we can do that. Whatever we can do to get this information out to help our communities go to the next level, I'm all in.
Thank you. I'll take you up on that one. I'd like that, definitely.
Look, this sounds like a mini part 3.
Okay.
But the last thing I want to ask is, how can someone obtain a copy of the Florida School Laws Manual?
It's online, but you know, with the governor's office and everybody who print these, we're not into the printing of these big books anymore. But it works handy for me when I'm traveling on business, as I be going, you know, to our 28 colleges. But it is online.
Okay.
And available to. I will get the link and share it with you, Ms. Jackson, so that everyone can get a copy of that.
That'll be great.
Handily. But I'm kind of the old school. I'm that 70s baby who like to see stuff on hand and mark the book up. But when we talk about the transparency, that goes back to what I talked about, the communication level of our local law enforcement, but that goes across the state and nationally, that if we're not transparent in our communication levels within our communities, colleges, and our community as a whole, we're failing our communities. Remember, we used to be community college before we became state colleges, and we're a pillar of our communities. And so over at Northwest Florida State College, if we're not being a pillar of our community, we're failing our colleges. If we're not being involved in our community, we're failing our communities. So as a whole, we have to be transparent on the way that we do our laws, the way we do our policies, and the way we do our procedures. And it goes all the way back, protest to policy. What are we going to do with the great 28 colleges to address these issues in our community? And I'm challenging Marcia, I'm challenging McGill, I'm challenging Salters, I'm challenging Woods, and I'm challenging everybody else besides myself. Let's make a difference in how we're doing in our community to better the social justice issues that we have in place right now.
Well, that was a great final call to action.
Yes.
So thank you all. Ms. Kiner, do you have any final closing remarks for today?
Look, the way that Pastor Jordan just closed this out, I don't know that I need to touch it. But I do want to say this. I was holding it. I think, at least for me, I'll just speak for myself. The challenge has been, you see people say things like Blue Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, as if you can't support our police and policing if you support something like Black Lives Matter. And I view it all as we're all in this together. What I think has been maybe missing from a lot of the conversations, at least that I've had with family, friends, and social media, when I've chosen to say something, is that so often it seemed like the voices of our brothers and sisters who are in law enforcement have been muted. And I don't know if that's policy or if that's choice. I think the more we hear from those of you who are in law enforcement, the things that we heard today, and some of you I know and know very well, I think that makes a difference. Knowing that you feel like we do. We know everybody in law enforcement isn't bad. We love you all. We are appreciative of the job that you do, because many of us wouldn't and couldn't do it. But what we do want to hear from you is just what we heard Ryan say and Dr. Salters say, that the bad apples have to get out. They don't need to be a part of policing. And so I just want to say to those of you that are in law enforcement, thank you. Thank you for the jobs you've done. Thank you for the job you're doing. And continue to use your voices, because I really do believe that's what's been missing. We haven't been hearing from you. Everybody else has been voicing their concerns and their opinions. But the people I really want to hear from, really moving forward, I want to hear from law enforcement. You know what the training consists of. You know what you did in order to earn that badge and to be out in the communities doing what you do. And you know your brothers and sisters who are doing their jobs to the best of their abilities and the ones that are not. And so hearing from you and how we can change things from inside out, I think that really matters. So thank you all for joining us on this webinar today. Thank you, Ms. Jackson, and thank you, Ms. Pierre, if you're out there for coming up with the idea for social justice matters. I think we're going to continue these conversations. We certainly, as my door creaks, we certainly, I think, are just at the beginning of these conversations. There's more that we can do. I accept your challenge, Brother Jordan, to do my part. And so those are my closing comments, Madam
Well, I won't
Moderator.
leave you hanging. You know where I'm at, and I know where you at. We're right down the street from each other. So let's connect with the rest of the panelists and the rest of the individuals who've been on these last two webinars to see what we can do to change the state, because we're all in this together.
Yes, sir.
All right, everybody have a great day and
Take
see
care.
you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless.